We meet again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Your investigation revealed that Luis Rivera used burner phones in connection with this murder, right?
He used one during the murder, yes.
That he threw away, right?
We don't know what he did with the actual phone, but he quit using it after the murder.
Okay. Sigfredo used burner phones as well, right?
We're aware of him using one during the murder, too.
And you heard about on the wire that he was going to use a burner phone, right? He was going to go get a burner phone.
He talked about getting rid of his phone after he used it.
Right.
Correct.
And so did Catherine Magbanua, right?
I don't remember her saying she was going to get rid of the phone, no.
Do you recall Sigfredo Garcia telling Catherine Magbanua on the wires, we need to go get new phones?
They did go get new phones eventually after we interviewed them.
They went to Walmart to buy two phones, right?
Correct. After I interviewed Sigfredo and she was attempted to be interviewed. Correct.
After Sigfredo Garcia was arrested, Catherine Magbanua only used her, to your knowledge, her burner phone, right?
No, she still used both phones, but she used them in very limited capacity.
There's no evidence that Charlie Adelson ever used a burner phone, right?
Not that we were able to establish.
During the wires, he always used the same phone, correct? The cell phone.
Correct, with WhatsApp.
Fair enough. There's no evidence that he ever went and bought a burner phone, right?
I have not collected evidence of a burner phone. We did have witnesses that we interviewed make reference to him having more than one phone, but we never were able to establish that.
Never were able to corroborate that, right?
No.
And in fact, when he was arrested 8 years after the murder, 6 years after everyone else was arrested, he had the same phone number, right?
I believe he did.
Okay. He used that same phone number for more than a decade, right?
That's roughly correct, yes.
Okay. Now, the day before Sigfredo Garcia's arrest, law enforcement went to his place of work and tried to interview him, right?
That's correct, I did.
Did you say you did?
Yes, sir.
And you believe that he lied during the interview, obviously, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, at the same time that Sigfredo Garcia was being interviewed, other law enforcement went to the place where they were living, him and Katie, and knocked on the door and tried to interview her, right?
That's correct.
And she hid, right?
She did.
And you know she hid because you heard on the wires that she was making calls to a lot of people, right?
That's correct.
On all the people that she was calling on the wires, she never calls Charlie Adelson, right? When she's hiding.
While she's hiding just during that hour-long scenario, I don't believe she did. But I was in Miami. I wasn't monitoring the wire then.
But you have put in all the wires here, so you've reviewed them, right?
Yes, long time ago.
And in reviewing the wires, will you take my representation that she called 3 people and none of them were Charlie Adelson?
Sure, that sounds accurate.
And from the calls that you have reviewed and listened on the wires, it was obvious to her, in fact she said it on the calls, that the police were outside her house, right?
Correct.
So if she testified before this jury that she had no idea the police were outside her house because they didn't announce themselves, that would be a lie, right?
I believe at the beginning she might not have known, but by the end of it, I believe she did know, yes.
Okay. Fair to say at some point when she was hiding in the house, she knew that the FBI and the police, maybe not the FBI, but she knew that law enforcement were at her front door, right?
Yes, I believe she did.
Okay. The next day when Sigfredo Garcia was arrested the next day, right?
That's correct, the next evening.
And when he was arrested, Catherine Magbanua left her townhouse and never with the kids and never came back, right?
No, that's incorrect.
That's incorrect. She went back to live in that townhouse?
No, she didn't live in that house the night after we conducted the interview of Sigfredo.
Okay. Then she left?
Yes.
Okay. And she never came back?
Correct.
Fair enough. Law enforcement didn't know where she was for a while, right?
Correct. She was keeping her phones off. We knew she was still in the state of Florida, but it would give us a brief indication, and then, yes, we didn't know where she was at all times, for sure, or exact location.
You were worried that she had fled, right?
I wasn't worried she fled the state. I knew she had turned her phone off and was eluding us.
Did Charlie Adelson turn off his phone after the arrest?
No, he just stopped using it for quite a significant period. Quit using it regularly, I should say.
Aren't there a lot of calls after the arrest between Charlie Adelson on his phone?
Of insignificance, just like work calls and things like that.
Fair enough.
Right.
But I want to make sure the jury understands he continued to use his phone, right?
He did, in a different capacity, in my opinion.
But he continued to use his phone, Special Agent, right?
Yes, sir, he did.
He didn't get a new phone.
Not that we know of.
He didn't change his number.
Correct.
He went to work.
Correct.
He didn't flee his house.
Not that we know of, no.
Well, when you arrested him 6 years later, was he in the same house?
He was that night, yes.
Okay. You say that night.
Or that morning.
Had he been living in that house pretty much continually for the next 6 years?
I'm aware that he had a couple of different houses. I'm not sure if I don't know if he stayed in that house all the time or not, because I didn't keep tabs on him every day.
Okay, fair enough. But when you went to arrest him, you knew where to go, right?
We found him there, yes.
And you knew where to go because that was his main residence, right?
Correct. It was still his residence of
and
some record.
That had been his residence for the entire time since 2014, correct? I'm not saying he didn't have other residences, but that was the place where he primarily lived, correct?
He still owned the house. I believe on his driver's license he had a different address. He changed it.
Okay. Now, it was made public, the arrest of Rivera and Sigfredo in May 2016, correct?
Correct. Right after his arrest, correct.
And Charlie Adelson didn't flee.
Not that I know of.
Well, you didn't have to go on a manhunt for him, right?
Not years later. We didn't look for him immediately right then.
There were news reports, 2020 primetime specials in September 2016. He didn't flee.
Correct. Not that I'm aware of.
There was a probable cause affidavit leaked to the media in September 2016. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of it, yes.
And that probable cause affidavit was over 20 pages long?
I don't recall, but that sounds right.
It was very detailed?
It was.
Much of the evidence that came in this courtroom in the last week was in that report, right?
That's correct.
And it was against Charlie Adelson, right?
Some of it was, yes.
And when that was released, he didn't flee, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Catherine McBanerwa was arrested in October 2016, right?
Correct.
He didn't flee, right?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Sigfredo Garcia was convicted at trial in 2019. Charlie Adelson didn't flee, right?
That's correct.
The state announced its intention to retry Catherine McBanerwa after the jury hung in 2019. Again, he didn't flee, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
And in the months leading up to her trial, he didn't flee, correct?
Correct.
Now, he did travel out of the country many times, right?
I believe so, yes.
And he traveled to some places where extradition is, at least we could say, difficult.
Could be.
Did he? Agent, we were talking about the places he went to where extradition was tough. He always came back, right?
Yes.
Now, during the course of your investigation, did you review text messages between Katie and Charlie?
Yes.
And did you learn that Katie wanted a longer, deeper relationship with Charlie as time went on?
I don't know if I recall that. There was a lot of back and forth there.
Fair enough. Did you learn that Charlie didn't feel the same way?
I don't know if I recall that either.
Did you see text messages where he said, I don't want to get married, I don't want 2 kids, to that effect?
Possibly that. I mean, it's probably in there somewhere. There was a lot of back and forth between him and other females that I could be getting confused.
Do you recall him talking to a friend in text messages, talking about a trip he was going to take with Katie in the early to mid-summer before the murder, where he told his friend it's the goodbye tour?
That sounds familiar.
Did you learn that Katie and Charlie broke up within weeks after the murder?
No. My understanding was possibly right around the time of the murder. I'm not sure the exact timing of it, though.
Fair enough. Now, we listened to a lot of calls. Katie lies to Charlie when she told him that she would call the undercover, right?
Correct.
She lied to Charlie when she told him that she called the undercover and there was no answer.
Correct.
She lied to Charlie when she told him that the undercover number was a non-working number, right?
Correct.
Non-working number would be like in the old days where it goes beep, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. She lied to Charlie when she said she called the undercover and got an answering machine. When she called the undercover.
Correct. She was not the one to make the call. Correct.
She lied to Charlie when she said she left a threatening message. She left a threatening message.
Correct.
On the undercover's voicemail.
Correct.
By the way, Sigfredo Garcia may have called the voicemail, but he didn't leave any message, right?
No, that's correct. He did not.
He didn't leave a threatening message.
No.
Another lie by Katie to Charlie, correct?
Correct. Or by Sigfredo, one of the two.
After her conviction, Catherine Magbanua was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, right?
Correct.
And about a month after she was sentenced, she decided she wanted to cooperate.
I don't know the timing of it.
Fair enough. At some point after her sentencing, she wanted to cooperate, right?
Correct.
And she met with law enforcement at least twice. You were there 2 times.
That's correct.
And you met for hours.
I wouldn't. The first time I think was probably less than an hour, around an hour. The second time I met with her was probably less than an hour.
If I told you the first time was 2 hours and 12 minutes, would you believe me?
That's what it shows us sitting in the room with her for 2 hours and 12 minutes?
That's what the notes say.
Okay. If that's what the video shows, then...
Fair enough. Nonetheless, you met with her twice.
Okay.
She was placed under oath.
Yes.
And we'll start with the first meeting. You believe she continued to lie.
Correct.
You even tried to stop the interview the first time, correct?
I didn't stop the interview. I tried to relay to her that, yeah, it was in her best interest to tell the truth.
You didn't believe her.
I didn't believe a lot of the...
What is the objection?
Your Honor.
Say that one more time.
Speculation. You can't give opinions about other witnesses.
Sustained.
Were you frustrated?
Somewhat of some certain things I was, yes.
Was she telling you things? We'll go to your second interview of her. Were you frustrated in the second interview as well?
Yes, I was.
You didn't believe she was being... I'll withdraw. During her second interview, at one point, you said to her, "What you are telling us just doesn't make sense." Do you recall telling her that?
That sounds about right.
And this wasn't her first trial when she testified, right? I mean, I know you didn't believe her then, but this was during her
Correct.
proffers, right?
Yes.
This was just less than a year ago, right?
I don't remember the date, but that sounds right.
Now, the bump was an extortion, right?
It was a attempted extortion, correct? Somewhat.
But what law enforcement didn't know is that an extortion had already happened, right?
Don't believe there was an extortion prior.
What law enforcement didn't understand is that the things said on the recording related to the fact that there had already been an earlier extortion.
I disagree.
Do you recall on the recordings, repeatedly, Charlie Adelson is talking about the characteristics of the person who did the bump?
Yes.
He's saying things like, he used his phone, he's not disguising himself, he's not giving 48 hours, he's not making a threat. Do you recall that?
I do.
Did it seem like he was comparing it to something else?
To me,
Yes.
it seemed like he was comparing it to a TV show.
Fair enough. Because you don't know what happened on July 18th, 2014, right?
July 18th, 2014?
You don't know what happened on the evening of July 18, 2014 in Charlie Adelson's house, right?
Oh, you're referring to the date of the murder. I know what happened on that day, but not that evening, no.
You don't know what happened in his house that night, right?
Correct.
During the bump, Charlie's way of calming his mom down, a co-conspirator, right? You consider her a co-conspirator.
I do, yes.
Charlie's way of calming down his mom, a co-conspirator, was telling her that he thought it was the police, right?
That was one way, yes.
So let me get this straight. Two people who have just done a murder prefer the bump to be a policeman rather than another co-conspirator or another bad guy.
Correct.
What could this note mean? The only people who actually spoke to the undercover was Charlie Adelson and Donna Adelson, correct?
Correct.
And when they spoke to the undercover, they used their phones. Let me be more precise.
Okay.
When Charlie Adelson spoke to the undercover, he used his cell phone.
He used, yes, and he blocked his number when he called, yes.
He star 67'd it.
Correct.
He used his cell phone, though, correct?
I believe he did. I can't remember the exact
Fair.
dial digits that it came from.
Fair enough. Now, the calls that you put in, you can read the words, but there's some guessing as to the meaning, correct? Of what they're talking about?
It could be, yes.
And Dolce Vita, in particular, you can't hear a lot of what Katie Magbana was saying, correct?
It's hard to hear a lot of it, yes.
There's about 100 unintelligibles when she is speaking, correct?
Correct.
And there's a missing chunk of that meeting before the recording even starts, right?
Correct. They got in the vehicle first and before they went into the restaurant.
And let's talk about them getting in that vehicle. So before they get to Dolce Vita, Charlie Adelson and Katie Magbanua meet in a car.
He pulls up and she comes out of her office and gets in the car, yes.
How long are they in that car for?
It's an approximation around 10, 15 minutes.
I think you're right. And you don't know what was said in that car, right?
No.
Now, during this bump, you all are listening on the wires, right?
Correct.
And no one's paying the money.
Correct.
And part of what you're hearing is that the threats aren't big enough.
No, I disagree with that.
Okay? Let me ask it this way.
Okay.
It starts with a bump on the street, right?
Right.
And we watched it. The gentleman who's playing Aladdin King, he's a little bit polite. Can we say that?
Correct.
He's the nicest Aladdin King I've ever seen in my life.
Correct. There's reasons.
The next event that happens is, well, there's a bunch of events, but let me tell you the next progression. Is a letter is delivered to Donna and Harvey Adelson's apartment.
Correct.
So now you've gone from the street to the apartment, right?
That's correct.
And the letter is a little more threatening.
A little bit.
And still no one pays.
Correct.
And then there's a couple calls to the office. There's a call to the office.
Correct.
Still no one pays.
Correct.
And then there's a text message that comes at like 2 or 3 in the morning to Donna Adelson, right?
Yes.
And the timing is kind of important, right?
It could be. Be taken that way.
And the text message is definitely more threatening.
Yes.
Now, going to the wires very briefly. Don't worry, I'm not going to go over them all with you.
Thank you.
Do you recall some wires around April 26 where Katie and Sigfredo are fighting?
Of 16, yes.
And some wires that were not played in court. But do you recall that they were fighting about something completely different than this case?
Could have been.
They were fighting about a girl that that Katie found on Sigfredo's cell phone.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
With a tattoo.
I don't remember that part.
And do you recall that the day before, or 2 days before the letter, law enforcement sends the letter to Donna and Harvey Adelson, that Katie actually leaves the house. She leaves him.
I do recall her leaving the house at some point. I don't remember the timing, though.
And the call that Ms. Kappelman played for you, where they're fighting, Sigfredo in the beginning of the call thinks that she's talking about, like he says, you need to make an appointment to see your son. Recall that?
Yes.
And it's because she has just left the house the day before.
Sounds correct.
She's
yes.
left him.
correct.
And she says to him in the text message, listen, I got to talk to you about something else.
Yes.
You recall that?
I do.
And you recall that Charlie Adelson finds out that these two are having problems, and he freaks out.
I don't remember that. I remember him talking to her about their separation and trying to encourage her.
And he's encouraging her to get back together with him, right?
I do remember that, yes.
By the way, Ms. Kappelman asked you after the last bump text that was received in the early morning by Donna Adelson. She asked you if anyone actually told the undercover, go to the police and collect your reward. You remember her asking you that question?
I thought that was before that text message.
Well, let's just make this clear, whether it's
Okay.
before or after.
Okay.
Isn't it true that that's precisely what Miss Adelson, Donna Adelson, told the undercover? If you have information, go to the police.
She did at that point. That's correct.
Right? That's what she said.
On that call.
Now, she didn't want to go to the police. She never went to the police, right?
Correct.
Charlie never went to the police.
No.
And you don't know why. You guess why, but you don't know why.
There's reasonable belief, yes.
But you don't know why he didn't go to the police.
Can't read his mind, no.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Take your time.
Looking at those text messages, by the way, after the night of July 18th, do you see a decrease in text messages initially? So if you're looking at July to September between Charlie Adelson and Catherine Magbanua.
A decrease in text message, you're talking about 2014?
Yeah, initially.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall.
Do you see that the relationship, though, as time goes on, gets stronger? Not boyfriend-girlfriend, but does definitely get stronger.
I don't recall.
Now, I want to just make sure that something was clear yesterday because I think it was a little confusing. And I don't think it was on purpose, but I want to make sure that the facts are clear.
Sure.
After Professor Markel was murdered, Wendy Adelson gave complete access to the Markels. Isn't that true? Until the email was sent.
I don't know about complete access, but I know when that email was sent, there were things that were cut off.
Fair enough. But before the email was sent, there was a different type of access.
There was better access. I could say that.
Do you recall, and you know what, let me set it up first. It might take a second, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Especially with new technology. Oh, no, you've already called. It's SX 130. It's your exhibit 130. It's one of the wires. call 989. Hold on one second, Your Honor. Do you recall the Dave call?
Which one?
The first call I think that was played yesterday. It was a call about Charlie and Donna's affection for Dave.
Sure. I remember several of them, but
And do you recall that Miss Kappelman played 19 minutes and 11 seconds of that call? And then she stopped it.
I don't recall how much or when, but that's possible, yes.
Well, let me play when it was stopped.
Okay.
If I just play it, is it going to go on this thing? Sorry. Oh, yeah. And while we work on this, let me do a test before I ask a question.
Go ahead.
To make money. They already have their kids.
Okay. Did it work in the headphones? No. All right. Well, I think we can hear it. It's pretty loud. Let's see if we can hear it. I'm going to play you at 20 minutes and 20
Looking
seconds.
to make a whole. Want to make money. They already have their kids. I'm not looking to make a whole.
She owes it to those kids.
Yeah, but
She has an opportunity that she would throw in the garbage, and then these kids, and believe me, that's it. They're not going to have another
No.
dad.
no. Well,
And
it was
crazy.
Listen, they had a dad. It was a tragedy. What happened?
Yeah. Well,
What I'm
here's an
telling you.
opportunity.
So there, 20 minutes and 25 seconds into the call, about 2 minutes after Miss Kappelman stopped it, Charlie Adelson says it's a tragedy what happened to their dad, right?
Yes, he did.
And that was in response to his mom saying Dave would be a great dad, right?
Correct.
And Charlie says they already had a dad and it was a tragedy what happened to him.
He did.
When Charlie Adelson said that on this call, that was stopped before this jury, when he said that on that call, that's before the bump.
I believe it was, yes.
That's 21 months after the murder.
Correct.
He had no idea whatsoever that he was being recorded.
I would probably disagree with that.
But the other stuff, remember yesterday she brought in other stuff about Dave and she asked you those same questions. She said this is before the bump. Your caller asked